Is the Camino de Santiago safe for a woman to walk on her own? It's a question that a lot of people ask, and I spent 31 days walking solo on the Camino Portuguese. And in this podcast, I'm going to talk about my experience and how I felt in terms of safety walking the Camino solo.
Redo You, the podcast that teaches you tools and strategies so you can build the confidence to rediscover and reinvent yourself. With me, Emma Hull, your favorite life coach. Each week, I'll introduce a concept that you can implement right away so you can live your most authentic life. Let's get started.
In October and November of 2025, I walked from Lisbon to Santiago and then to Finisterre on my own. And so in this podcast, I'm going to talk about what that experience was, how it is as a woman on your own to walk the Camino, and discuss some of the safety precautions that I took, and then what I expected might happen, what actually happened. So if you're thinking of walking the Camino de Santiago on your own, check this out and feel free to reach out with any questions that you have afterwards. I'd love to talk to you about my experience. I was definitely nervous going to Lisbon, and because it's a bigger city, a touristy city, and you do hear stories. And even though I'd been to Lisbon before, I felt a little bit nervous about going with like everything on my back. But in the end, that was completely unnecessary. Nothing bad happened. My flight came in late at night, I think about 11 o'clock at night. I took the subway down to Rossio, walked across Rossio Square. It was busy. Yes, there were people offering to sell me drugs, but I didn't feel in any way physically threatened. I just said no thank you, kept going. And then arrived at my hostel, got checked in. In the hostel itself, they actually provided these locking drawers under your bunk bed, so that felt really good. I had like one of those collapsible grocery bags, which was one of my best things that I took on the Camino. And so I used that to take my stuff with me when I went to have a shower and things like that. So my phone was with me, but I actually didn't worry too much about my money and my passport being in my bag because it was locked away. When I started out that first day out of Lisbon, I had a waist belt that has pockets in it, and I wore that under my clothes with my passport and my extra money in. But I actually never felt threatened by any people as I was walking along. Really, it seemed like everyone was just doing their own thing. I walked from Rossio down to the cathedral and then through the Alfama district, through the industrial area, and really never felt unsafe in any way at all. So I ended up just ditching that belt, putting a small amount of money, and I also had a travel card, like a prepaid Visa card, and I kept those on me, in a pocket. And then I had the rest of my money, my passports, in a Ziploc that was inside my main backpack, and really that felt fine to me from then on. I stayed in a mixture of different accommodations as I was traveling. And so obviously staying in an Airbnb, whereas in an apartment on my own felt very safe because it was just me there. There were other times that I was in hotels. Again, definitely never had any concerns even going into a hotel myself, because I I do that regularly, but I know that some people do worry about hotel security. But I was never worried that anyone was going to break into my hotel room or anything like that. In the albergues, it was definitely a little bit different. Some of them do have places where you can lock your bag away. That's more of a rarity, I found. For the most part, there was not really anywhere. You kind of either put your bag like under your bed or next to your bed. But I never worried that anyone was going to be going through my bag and my stuff. I had originally taken a little padlock with me, but I never ended up using that. And just, I had my pilgrim passport, my passport, and my cash were always in my main bag, and just in a pocket inside that. So in terms of worrying about having my possessions stolen, that actually never came to fruition. I never felt in any way at risk of that. And in the 31 days, 800 kilometers through Porto, Lisbon, Santiago, big cities, I never worried at all. I always felt very safe. In terms of, another thing that I worried that I might feel uncomfortable about is shared dorms. As a woman, it can feel uncomfortable to be sleeping in a shared dorm environment and sharing bathrooms with men. And that turned out not to be a concern either, I'm delighted to say. I found that everyone really was very respectful. People are just dealing with their own stuff. They're not worried about what you're doing. I didn't feel like anyone was looking at me or paying particular attention to me. There were times, depending on what dorm bed you get, you can use your towel or other things to, if you're in the bottom bunk, which was my favorite, to kind of create a little sort of tent for yourself in there. But other times that just wasn't possible, or other times it wasn't necessary. There were times that I was the only person in a dorm as well. But very much, even when I was in the busier section, once I got to from Camino up the central route, oftentimes the dorms were full, and there were more men when I was hiking than women, and I never felt threatened or unsafe in any way. So that was really great. In terms of another safety concern that I had was actually about walking on the road, because there's quite a few sections, especially from Lisbon to Porto, where you are literally walking on the side of the road and there isn't a pavement or a hard shoulder sidewalk. You are on the road. And it did definitely feel a little bit sketchy at first, but I found I didn't get run over, didn't even have a close call. Just being aware, walking facing the traffic, paying attention, and stopping if there were vehicles coming both ways, like literally just stopping and being as out of the way as possible, at least so I wasn't moving, so I was stable if then the wind from a truck passing me close buffeted me. So that was a real relief as well. Another area that I worried about, well, actually I hadn't worried about in advance because I had no idea that this would happen. There were a couple of days where it had rained so much that the rivers had all been inundated. This was in the central section, kind of near Porino. And there were sections where the water was over my knees. And I was walking on my own, but there were other pilgrims kind of in the vicinity. And there was one section that really it would have been very hard to know where the river was and where the path was. But other pilgrims were walking directly ahead of me, so it was nice to be able to watch them walk through and follow their footsteps. So, there might be a time that you come across a section that is flooded, and if you're on your own, perhaps just wait for someone else to come along so that you can cross it together. It turned out actually that later that day the police ended up closing that particular section because it was so inundated. I did take a couple of different ride shares at different times. Those all felt very safe. And public transit wise, not really a great deal. Like I said, the subway in Lisbon, and then I took the bus from Santiago to Porto. But walking on my own through long isolated sections, didn't run into anyone that was in any way intimidating or threatening. Same walking through industrial areas of cities. Or busy tourist areas. I really found that everyone was really quite friendly. And even there were times when I'd be walking along and someone would honk their horn or stop me on the street and say, "Santiago?" And I'd nod and they'd be like, no, and point me in the other direction. So if I'd missed a turn, complete strangers were going out of their way to help get me back on track. So if you are in any way concerned about personal safety as a woman walking the Camino de Santiago solo, I can say from my experience that I had zero concerns, zero incidents, and I encourage you to go and do it. Don't let fear stop you from living your life and from enjoying your Camino. If you would like more Camino resources, visit my website, lifeuntethered.com/Camino, and you can get my detailed itinerary and emails from my diary of my journey, and I'll be populating that with a whole bunch of other resources as well. I'm here to help you walk the way your way.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Redo You podcast. Remember to subscribe, rate, and review, and tell a friend, because together we rise even higher. See you next Friday.